participatory video filmmaking is a mode of communication that allows for me, the way I understand it is more in terms of the delegation of power from the filmmaker, okay, the filmmaker who comes with the knowledge, the technique, with the subject, with the intention, to the subject, who is originally the person who owns the content, or the owner of the information. And yet, at the end of the day, it is the filmmaker who controls the way that information is going to be packaged. So what I do is to try to release my power as a filmmaker to allow this subject to also control the way that material is going to be presented to the rest of the world. And so when I go to Africa, I make what I call participatory videos. Now, Stone Town is a World Heritage Site, but I always argue that it's probably the easiest thing to conserve those buildings. I mean, you can always get billions and billions of dollars to come and remake them or put them up again. You can conserve, buildings, but you cannot conserve the culture of the people if you do not give them the power to actually find the ways of talking, developing, and then, highlighting that which makes Stone Town so interesting to the rest of the world. Because people don't come to Stone Town just to look for the buildings. They're going to look at the culture of the people who live in those buildings, the people who have been able to communicate to the rest of the world using the Tao. The people who have had a history of, a million slaves coming through that port. So that's the culture that people are talking about conserving. Now, if we are going to conserve that, that history, if we are going to highlight the role that history has to the rest of humanity, then we need to find a way of them telling us what is important about, to conserve. I made a couple of documentaries, and then I had a group of 12 students whom I taught how to make films, and they also started making their own films. And then we progressed into making feature documentaries, because the students, of course, are very much interested in expressing themselves artistically through stories. So we started making stories based on the documentary material, and then we progressed to the level of even making soap operas, from the same material. The whole idea was to get people more interested in understanding the lives of the people, and probably we always have to find the best way the people are going to be interested in listening and understanding, those cultures. To understand how people live, how people communicate, how people relate to each other. And so we use the soap opera to talk about the culture of the people of Zanzibar. The virus actually kills the cassava in its entirety. It kills the root, which is the tuber, which is the food, and then it kills the plant, which people use for firewood, and then, of course, the grass, the leaves never get to grow up, which is also another source of food. So you're losing the whole tree, which is a source of, literally, of life for that community. So scientists come at the very end of the problem, when everything is known, and literally, people have already started dying. Now, we thought one of the ways in which we can pick on the knowledge of the people who live there is by understanding how they faced up to that problem. When did they recognize they have a problem? In what way they were able to recognize that they have a problem? Now, that is the knowledge source. There must be ways in which people know knowledge before they get to the level where there's a problem. So we went back to the beginning and said, how did you get to know there was a problem? And so the people started saying, oh, because we started to see, we couldn't get, tubers. So we wondered why the tubers were all so weak and they were all mushy. And they went back and started looking at which tubers, where did they start? And slowly they started picking out the actual, how do I put, process by which you can actually pick out when the problem began. And so they started looking at the grass and the leaves, and the leaves started getting yellow. They said, oh, when the leaves start getting yellow, there's a problem. So slowly they started picking up a knowledge process by which they can recognize a problem even before the problem develops. And so we made documentaries in which we started to see how people take advantage of weak moments, okay, even with problems, to create greater knowledges. And that for me was an empowerment environment. That is something that I've always wanted to do, and I feel it is important and necessary for academics who spend a lot of time, theorizing on things, to also go back and start to develop the sources of knowledge, so that that knowledge can become much more useful and fruitful to the rest of the world. What happens here is a lot of people see what others have done or have been able to do, and they can always go back and see, how could I apply that process in my own environment. I remember, for example, once we in Kenya, actually, we showed this film to a group of women, and one of the outcomes of the story that we were telling was that a woman was now able to make cakes out of cassava, and which is something that the other villagers had never imagined, that actually you can use cassava flour to make cakes. And through the explanation that the other woman in this village was actually explaining to about the making of that cake, because we actually showed the whole process of making a cassava cake, this woman goes, oh, wow, I'm going to try to go and make that one. That's excellent. If I can't do it, I'm going to go back to that village and ask them to give me the recipe. Now, that for me was absolutely the best thing that could happen, because it made this other person to see the possibilities beyond what they've always been doing. So this other woman is going to be able to experiment again and create something new. So that is hopefully not the pinnacle of what the film might be able to do, but one of the things that might come out of out of merely asking people for their experience in terms of how they've been able to create new knowledges about their environments. When I'm there, I become a totally different person, because I find myself in a position where I learn faster than I've ever been able to learn, because I think it's important for us to find the things that we feel comfortable with. When I'm here, I feel comfortable teaching to my students and expounding on some of the things that they probably have a basis of understanding, but they cannot really understand the nitty-gritty of it. When I go to Africa, it's a totally different environment where I seem to be the one who knows, and then I turn myself around and say, what is it that I really don't know here? And then I go back and start learning from them exactly the thing that I feel I don't know. And it's very, very easy, because no person knows everything. And it makes my life so much easier when I go and realize, oh, how much a fool I am, how much more can I learn from 10 people, from this young person, from this old woman, from this old man who feels like they don't know anything, and suddenly I can sit in front of them and say, teach me, please, tell me how to go about this. It gives me that power to know that I can, learn something else. And I think also giving back, the power to this old man who thought, oh, here's a professor who knows everything, and suddenly, oh, I can teach this professor, I can teach this teacher who's teaching everybody there something that they don't know.